بلادي يغني للسما الزرقاء فلسطين يا بلادي. جفرة وهي الربيع طير الحب الشادي يغني للسما الزرقاء فلسطين يا بلادي. جفرة وهي الربيع عالبير نشاد.
Hello, everyone. We are very happy to welcome you all to this light talk on Tor on the first day of the Palestine Digital Activism Forum 2023. I'm Isa Mhassani, the Executive Director of Gilsa, the Jordan Open Source Association, and as an open source advocate and activist myself and a software developer, I'm extremely glad to welcome our guest today, the Executive Director of Tor, Isabella Fernandez. Just a short introduction about Isabella. Isabella became Executive Director of Tor in 2018. She joined Tor actually in 2015 as a project manager. And she had so many contributions to the organization. She also led the UX team and implemented the critical usability improvements for the Tor browser and the Tor website. Again, Isabella, we are very glad to have you today and to talk about Tor and the role of Tor in promoting human rights and supporting online privacy. And definitely in this light talk, we are going to focus on how open technologies in general, but very specifically Tor, can ensure that we will not fall victim to regimes that force censorship on oppressed and marginalized communities like Palestinians. Isabella, ahlan wa sahlan, and welcome again. So if you allow me, I have a first question, and probably we know that Tor is widely used and is being used more and more, but there's still some sort of prejudice about Tor, and to be honest, a lot of authorities, law enforcement agencies, especially in this region, look down to Tor users. They have always some sort of suspicion about Tor users and people using Tor. Some Arab countries even try to block Tor in these countries. And even generally speaking, I mean, some people might associate Tor with, let's say, illegal or unlawful activities. But away from all this misleading information, what is Tor exactly, and why do you believe that it's important? It's very important for everyone, even for normal users. Let's say that they are not at risk or they are not trying to hide anything, to use Tor to protect their right to online privacy.
Hi, Isa. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be at the DAF, and I'm really happy. Yes, this is a great question. I think there's a lot of misleading information about Tor. So in a simple way, Tor is a technology that allows people to be anonymous online, right? Like, so let's talk a little bit about anonymity, because that's the problem, right? Like regimes or authoritarian governments or law enforcement, lawmakers, they try to equalize anonymity with crime, right? Like criminal activity. And actually, this is not right. This is actually, anonymity is one of the key elements for anyone in the world to exercise the civic rights. This is not just me saying, right? Like the UN has said that when for people to exercise the civic rights, they need to have also anonymity as part of it. I think if we all stop to think a little bit about one of the main pillars of democracy, it's the vote. And our vote is anonymous. And it's anonymous for a reason, right? When you are speaking out, when you are exercising your right to demand change, to talk about violations of human rights, or even to say and share your opinion, like picking a candidate in an election, you need to do so without the fear of retaliation. So being anonymous, it's a key part of civic rights in a democratic society. And I think that when governments, lawmakers, law enforcement agencies try to say that, oh, when allowing someone to be anonymous, you're allowing them to to commit a crime, they're undermining that power of anonymity in democracy, right? And we all need to stop to think, right? Like, what is the reason to undermine, wanted to undermine that and put that on people's culture, on people's mind? And I think that's one of the main point when I try to explain to people that we at all, we build this technology, our organization mission is to advance human rights, right? Like, so we want to create a way for people to be anonymous on the internet, because the internet today is not disconnected from the world that we live, like in real life, right? Like on offline, it's very much connected. So if we want to have the right, our civic rights in the offline world, and we want to translate them to the online world, we need to have a tool, we need to have a mechanism to also be anonymous. And toys for everyone. I think like sometimes it's very interesting because we do have pools where people can submit their stories anonymously to share why they use Tor with us. And we receive all kinds of stories. We have a doctor who says he used Tor to research about the patients because they want to preserve the patient privacy when they're researching about them. We have people talking about healthcare, right? They use Tor to protect the information when they're researching about the medical conditions. We have a father who says that he teaches his kids to use Tor because they want the kids to be able to research the internet for questions that teenagers have, normal things, and without having that information being collected and being associated with them for the rest of their lives, and use it can be used against them, can be used to send them advertise for things that they don't need. It can be used for 20,000 things, as we know, right? So we have activists using Tor, we have journalists using Tor, we have lawyers using Tor, we have law enforcement using Tor when they are researching, right, like and investigating a crime. So that is a huge lack of reasons why someone would want to use it. The reason we build our technology, again, is to advance human rights. And like I said, anonymity is a key part of exercising your rights in the real world and offline and online as well. So that's a little bit about where we're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, this makes totally sense. But also, let's say that in different contexts, I mean, for Palestinians, for example, or for many other societies that are dealing with very oppressive regimes, I mean, I think that the right to access information online in a confidential and private way become even more, let's say, important and crucial. And how specifically does Tor help in that? I mean, Tor help users to access the internet in a confidential way, and it is just about, I mean, accessing information online, or let's also assume, let's say, the other way around. So people who might want to publish information online, and I can think, for example, of activists or journalists that they want to publish, let's say, documentation or evidence of violations of human rights. How does Tor help them?
Right. So what is this technology I'm talking about, right? Like, so we have the base of Tor is a decentralized network. So Tor is a free software where we have thousands of volunteers all around the world who run servers to build this decentralized network. And when you connect to Tor to access anything, you actually bounce through 3 of these servers around the world. And every step of the way, your connection is encrypted. So when I'm trying to access a website to Tor, I will route to the first server, and that server might know who I am, come from, right? Like, might know I'm Brazilian, might know that I'm coming from Brazil, but will not know what I'm trying to access. And then this server will send a package to the middle one, and this communication is encrypted with a specific layer of encryption that only those 2 servers can see. And the middle one will not know who I am, will have no idea which website I want to access. And all they will know is that they need to send a package to the 3rd server. The 3rd server is the same way, right? Like, everything is encrypted. They have no idea about what happened with the first one. All they know that they received a packet from the middle server. They don't know who I am. And when they open this package, they say the website I want to access. And they're like, okay, there's someone on the internet who wants to access this website. So they open the website. And the website provider, all they say is that someone is coming from Tor and is trying to access this website, right? And because of the way the network works, it's very useful to bypass censorship, because normally censorship is very regional target. So we'll block things because you're coming from a certain region. And with this decentralized network, you are not coming from that region anymore. You're coming from another part of the world. Another piece of software that we have developed is a browser, which is just like any other browser. Is actually a copy of Firefox. But what we did was to modify it to enhance, create more features for privacy, because there are a lot of information that can be associated and aggregated to identify that you are you. So far, like when I explain the network, I'm explaining how you are protected on the wire, right? But if someone is actually like when you're requesting to see a website, a lot of information about your browser can be passed through it. So the size of your browser, the font that you're handling, the language that your computer is set on, all of that can be, if combined, it can identify who you are. And with Tor browser, we modified all of that so everybody looks the same. That's our goal, right? Like, so make it harder for people to single out somebody on the internet, and also make it easier for you to connect to the network. So when you use it all, like, you can not only bypass censorship, but you have this extra layer of protection, right? Like sometimes when you're just using a VPN, you don't have all of that protection, and you can still be identified, even though you might be able to bypass censorship. And another cool thing that we have at Tor, it's an address that can only be accessed inside of this network. So this is an address that ends with .onion, and it's reserved for Tor network. And this is very much used. This is used actually for a lot of things, but one of the things that people use is to create a website with this address, because then it becomes harder for the censor to block it. Because it does not go outside of the Tor network, you have more protection, because you have end-to-end encryption. You're protecting metadata. It's the whole process. It becomes more safer for the user, right? So when someone wants to publish, like if you are a blogger or if you're a journalist and you have your website and you want to make sure that it's protected against censorship, you can create an own address for this website. Sometimes people have own addresses associated with normal domain names, like the New York Times has an own address, but sometimes you can create an own address without associating with any domain. So you don't need to pay for a domain registration or anything like that, where people can track back to who owns the website. And because you accessing this website inside of the Tor network, nobody knows where the website is hosted. So it's much harder to hunt down who is responsible for that. And that protects the people who want to share information online. But own addresses are also used by other tools. People are very creative. We have a very vast ecosystem of applications that are built on the top of our technology. And one of these technologies, these applications, is called Onion Share. And Onion Share, what it does is it's kind of like Dropbox, right? You can drop a file on this and will automatically generate an Onion address for somebody else to download that file. The difference here is that you are your server. There is no third-party server. There is no cloud server going on. And this is extremely important, especially for, let's say, a journalist who wants to share an article with a colleague in a very safe way. Or let's say an activist who wants to give information for a human rights lawyer to build a case, right? Like, and they don't want anyone to know that they are the ones providing that information to the lawyer. So, or even organizations who want to just exchange information, the work that they're doing to defend human rights. So this is a very easy tool that is extremely safe for you to share files, share information with each other. And there are other tools that are built on the top of this technology. There are chats where you are your own server, so there is no centralized server for this chat to happen. You don't need to share your phone number. You don't need to create an account anywhere. And so there is no metadata, right? Like, because it's everything inside of the Tor network, so the metadata is obfuscated as well. So there are like more and more people are building different applications that helps people who, especially like in a situation, right, in Palestine, who are under extremely high surveillance environment, to be able to coordinate and do work online without being a target, and share information as well.
It's about technical aspects, and I think that the technology itself is what made Tor trustworthy, and user really trust Tor because, as you mentioned, it is free software, free in terms that is open source. I mean, everyone can have a look at how it works and review how it works, and this is one of the very important, I mean, technical aspects of the Tor browser and the Tor network itself. You also mentioned decentralization and how, for example, having a decentralized network with not, let's say, a single cloud provider or a single central authority that manages the whole network is something important to really ensure that sort of online privacy. But let me ask you about also the organizational part. And you, as a Tor project, you are operating as a non-profit model, let's say. Do you think that is how this non-profit nature of the Tor project is ensuring the right to online privacy?
I think that there is some values that we carry on as a nonprofit. Going back to the free software, open source, right? Like this is one key element of building trust, because anyone can audit our code and make sure that it's doing exactly what we're saying it does, right? And it's easy to say that, but then you ask me who is looking, right? Like, and I can also say that there's a lot of people looking. We actually have a very active academic community who is writing papers on Tor all the time, actually writing papers that teach us about vulnerability that doesn't even exist yet, that could be exploited, right? Like it's not actually being exploited today, that help us to build defenses mechanisms against those possible attacks. So I can tell you, it's not only open and people can look, there are people looking into it and analyzing our code and making sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. The other thing is, as a nonprofit, we have one of our key values is transparency. We are very open. We are very about the projects. We have grants, and I'm not going to be sugarcoating here. We have grants with the U.S. government. We have grants with the Sweden government, and but it's very open and very clear what is the work that we're doing by the money that we are receiving, right? Like, and another thing that I'd like to clarify is when you have a grant, you are proposing the work. You're not being told to do a work, right? It comes from you. So it comes from us, and we do a GitLab. It's open, right? Like anyone can see the tickets, can see what we're working. We have everything documented, all the sponsors that we have, what are the projects, you can track all the tickets. So transparency is a key element for Tor. We are always internally and externally, we value this because we believe people also think it's funny, right? Like for our organization who defends privacy so much, we are very open and transparent because this is how we believe trust is a key element. And the other aspect of not being for profit, I think it's very important. Forget about Tor for a second, right? Like if you're just using things on the internet, think about what is the business model, right? Like what is driving that tool, whoever created that tool, right? Like to do so what they're doing. Sometimes you're not paying to use the tool is because they are profiting out of your information and they're sharing that information, selling that information. So on our aspect, even though being a nonprofit, it's hard because you need to be, right, like getting donations, money is always an issue, but that is an extremely important aspect because it shows that our motivation is not for profit, is indeed to advance human rights. And on the aspect of not charging for the technology that we build, right? Like when it's part of our mission that our technology is free, as in free beer, right? Like people can access it, don't need to pay for it. Because I think affordability is a key issue here as well. Not to mention when you start paying for things on the internet, you're giving out more information, more data about you, right? Like, so that just complicates things even more. But not everybody around the world can pay for a service, right? Like, and we don't want anyone to be excluded from having access to our technology. So I think those are the elements, right? Like, we also have a very active community. This is another thing. I think it's a very important element, right? Like, we're not shut down on our word, doing our things and not talking to the world. We have like a vast community. We have people who are running the relays, but we also have people helping us with usability testing, people helping us with localization, people helping us writing code, testing our code. We have also partners organizations, human rights organizations, journalist organizations all around the world who are teaching other people how to use Tor. And we meet with them, we coordinate this with them very actively. So I think that this is another element, right? Like, people actually get to know the Tor people. It's very accessible. They can talk with us. We go meet with them. We don't, like, for instance, the reason why our tools have become better and better over the course of the years with usability is because we actually meet our users face to face, and we ask them questions, and we collect that feedback directly from them, right? Like, we're not collecting data. We're actually having that conversation directly with them. Our partners are having this conversation sometimes, because sometimes we cannot travel all around the world. That's why it's good to have a community. But they bring that feedback back to us, and we improve our tools based on real people's experience and what we are hearing from people. So I think all of those elements are important on building trust, right? Like, when you're talking about providing certain technology to people.
Yeah, I should be honest that I know a lot of folks from the Tor community, and they are amazing. Um, Actually, I mean, there was a question from the audience, which is, I think that you already answered it, from Rama Salahat, that she was asking about how you are sustaining Tor financially since you are a non-profit. But I think that you already covered that. But there was also, I mean, a very good question from Huda Al-Mimuni. About, I mean, please also talk about the security risks of having Tor on your machine and ways you can circumvent these risks. And I think this is a common issue with a lot of Tor users in the Arab region. I mean, just because you are using Tor, you are under the light of law enforcement agencies and authorities in the region. Do you have any short, quick advice regarding that?
Yes, I think there is a project called TELS, and TELS is an operating system that you can run from a USB disk. So if you don't want to have any evidence, right, like that you have Tor installed on your computer, I would advise people to use TELS instead, right? Like, so this is like, you will boot from that USB disk. So everything that you do while you're doing using Tor will be either stored on the disk or wipe up once you turn off your computer. So if someone, for whatever reason, have access physically to your machine, they will not know that you have Tor installed, right? Like, because you did it, use this operating system from your USB disk. On your phone, it is complicated, right? Like, once you have Arbord or the Tor browser installed on your phone, if someone has physical access, they will be able to see it. One tip I could give is, like, edit, remove it, like, once you're not using, or remove once you are, you're going to be maybe walking through the street by going through a checkpoint, right? Like, clean it up your device before you do so. So it's one more tip of security, right? Like, think about that. And then when you need it again, you install it again, right? Like, you don't need to have it all the time on your phone. I think one other piece of information for people to keep in mind is that when you are accessing the Tor network, it will, let's say I'm doing this from my home, my router, right? Like, so think about the router, like, okay, I have the router in my house, but if I'm doing for a university or my workplace, who controls that local network will know that somebody is coming and accessing from Tor, right? And then your local internet provider will know that you are accessing to Tor. They will not know what you're doing on Tor, but they will know that at some point you access it. Or so maybe you try to do this in a public area, right? Like not in the same place where you normally access the internet to avoid that correlation. Also, another tip is that we say that anonymity loves company. So the more people doing that from the same network, the better, because you're actually protecting everybody who's using it. So maybe one thing to do is to have a party. Like let's have a free internet party where everybody has privacy to browse the internet. Let's go to this location where it has internet, and we're all going to be using Tor together, and we're going to enjoy your time online, and we're all going to be protecting each other, because it's not going to be Isabella alone accessing Tor. It's going to be Isabella and her 20 friends at the same time accessing Tor. So to single out who actually did it, it will be harder. So I feel like that would be my last tip on that, to help people out.
Thanks a lot, Isabella. I really enjoyed this talk, and thank you a lot.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.